Hello, my name's Ben,
And my name's Josh.
and welcome back to FPL Graduates, and welcome back to another video where today we're going to be going through all the midfielders in FPL, and we're going to be telling you which midfielders you should be potentially looking at bringing into your team. We've gone through them all. Let's get straight into it.
Okay, then. So, yeah, we're going to do it our very own graduates way in terms of ranking them by degree level. So, we've got Masters is obviously the pinnacle. That's the best players that you want to get. First, 2-1, 2-2, third. It's pretty obvious how we're ranking them because they're all colour coded. So, if you don't get it, by all means comment, but it's pretty simple. So, let's get into the cheapest midfielders that we think are decent options.
Okay, so first of all, we've got our 5 million midfielders, and we've got 3 of them here to choose from. We've got Morgan Rogers of Aston Villa, obviously played 640 minutes last season, not too many. He did get 4 attacking returns last season. Fixture difficulty, maybe a little bit on the hard side. I've ranked him at a 2-2. Josh, you've ranked him at a 2-1.
Yeah, I just think for the price, he's probably the best asset at the moment. I don't think that he's as good as maybe he's being portrayed to be in pre-season and that everyone needs him, because I think there are a lot of options in those wide areas for Villa, and I don't necessarily think that he's going to be that first choice after Leon Bailey. So we will have to wait and see who is going to play in those areas, but they've got Jaden Philogene, they've got Illing Jr., Emi Buendia has just come back from a season-long injury. So that's 3 players plus him already who can play in those wide areas. So yeah, I don't think his position is nailed down, but I think for the price that you're getting, if you need a £5 million midfielder, say if you've got a very expensive Salah, Haaland and another premium draft, I think he's probably the best pick out of the bunch.
Yeah, you obviously got to sort of bear in mind and consider the potential incomings that Villa have as well. It was the same situation probably last season where we went, oh, he's getting a few minutes in pre-season, but Villa obviously sort of spent out and spent big, and they've sold a few players already this summer, so they're going to need to get some new players in. So let's see about that. The second guy that we've got in the £5 million midfielders is Amad Diallo of Manchester United. The fixtures are a little bit easier. However, the minutes are a lot less for him last season. Didn't get too many minutes, got a lot more in the cup competitions. However, if he does nail down a spot, he is really, really exciting. But between myself and Josh, we're just struggling to see where the minutes are going to come from at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a case of just seeing who United tend to play. Obviously, they've got the Community Shield anyway before Gameweek 1, which should give us a good idea as who's going to play in those wide areas. But with Jadon Sancho coming back, Rashford, Garnacho, there's a plethora of options in the wide areas, plus Europa League for Manchester United. So I think we'll see a lot of rotation in those wide areas. So maybe we're going to have to look towards maybe forwards, Bruno Fernandes, those type of players if you want Man United attackers.
And finally, we've got Joe Aribo, and we're probably going to sort of skip a little bit over him because we have him down as sort of third there, and not really sort of interest. The fixtures are decent to start off with for the season, but Southampton as a team, not too great, and obviously only 5 attacking returns in over 1,000 minutes last year.
Okay then, so we're going to move on to the £5.5 million midfielders. We won't go through all of them individually because otherwise this video will be about 2 hours long, but we'll go over some of our favourites. So we'll start off with Andreas Pereira. I've ranked him a little bit higher than what Ben has as a first for this sort of price category at the moment. Obviously, last season wasn't necessarily as efficient as maybe the season before in terms of attacking returns for Fulham. But I think with Andreas Pereira this season, a lot of sort of talismanic players have sort of left. He'll be on a lot of set pieces, maybe even penalties too. Not 100% confirmed on that. But I think for that price, you're getting a decent player. Is he the best player at that price point? I'm not sure, but I think you could give him maybe a good argument with the fixtures. What's your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I think you can make an argument, but obviously it's the sort of injuries and the potential sort of there that sort of puts you off a little bit. I'm more excited by Anthony Elanga. I think he had a season last year of sort of bedding himself into Nottingham Forest and can really potentially kick on next season. So I'm a bit more excited by him, which is why I've sort of put him a little bit higher than I have done Andreas Pereira. I'm also really interested by Kamada of Palace. Obviously, we don't know too much about him, but he scored in a pre-season friendly against Crawley at the time of recording, literally 20 minutes in. We're recording it, and he scored. So he's playing in a front three for Palace. So really interested by him. And Minter, obviously, of Brighton, has also scored in pre-season friendlies. 2-1 for both of us. Really intrigued to see because Brighton are a really good attacking side as well.
Yeah, he did look really good. Obviously, Semenyo picked up a goal as well, who's been reclassified this season to a midfielder from a forward. I think he could provide decent value at points throughout the season. Obviously, the fixtures there for Bournemouth aren't too bad. These are rated on attacking difficulty, so it'll be against the worst defences basically over time. That's why some teams, like Chelsea for example, they're ranked 20th because they face like Manchester City for example, who are one of the best defences in the league. But yeah, other than that, Smith Rowe as well, obviously on the verge of a move to Fulham at the time of recording. Not a lot of minutes last season, lots of injuries, but he's definitely someone to watch out for, right, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. And if he can keep injury free, I think he sort of lessens the appeal of Andreas Pereira almost if he gets that move across to Fulham. So we'll have to wait and see with that. Again, it might be that he gets a bit of a slower introduction into that Fulham team, given that he hasn't played many minutes at all over the last couple of seasons.
Okay then, so we're going to move on to probably the most talked about midfield price point in FPL at the moment. It's £6.5 million, and as you can see, there are a plethora of options. So we're going to go through a couple of them. First of all, Leon Bailey. For me, I've got him down as the first Masters player of this video. I just think the attack and returns for his price point last season, albeit massive overperformance on his expected data, were massive. It was only in 2,000 minutes as well, because he obviously had some injuries. There were a bit of rotation there with Moussa Diaby too. I just think it's a really good player at that price, 6.5 million. Even if he gets half those amount of returns, 11 returns or 12 returns for this season, you're still going to be really, really happy with that. Obviously, the fixtures for Villa aren't necessarily the best. You can obviously pick and choose when you play him. But what's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, not as keen as you are. I've put him down as a first. I think he's a really decent option, but to push him to the Masters level, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to commit that just yet. In terms of sort of other players that I was really interested in, Brennan Johnson and Christopher Nkunku are definitely of interest to me. I've got Johnson in my team at the moment, and I think he could have, again, it's all about finding these players at price points have a breakout season. It may not be sort of established Premier League players that are consistently sort of getting an amount of points returns that you're expecting from this sort of price point. You're looking for a breakout star that's going to massively overperform and massively make almost a mockery of their price point. I think Johnson could potentially do that. Obviously, Nkunku is also a really nice price point. Again, it's all about the injuries and sort of keeping him fit, because he's had so many injuries since he's come in at Chelsea. Let's see if he can keep fit. That's probably why he's not a Masters for me, just for that injury record, but he is a fantastic value if he keeps fit.
Yeah, both of them are currently in my draft too. I think Brennan Johnson's, like you say, is super, super interesting in terms of his price point, and his expected data is unbelievable. There's no one there that matches him in terms of goal threat. What's interesting though is that he actually got like 10 assists and only a few goals, so it was like the other way around in terms of how he got his returns last year. Elsewhere though, obviously Gibbs White's been talked about a lot. We've sort of got him middle of the field. I think he's one of those players who you probably won't get a double-digit haul from, but you'll get consistent 6 points, 4 points here and there. What's your thoughts on him? Would you go with him over Alanga, or would you sort of save the money?
I think you can get away with saving the money here. Full 1 million saving is quite big. Although you have the potential of more set pieces and penalties, Alanga could be more explosive in sort of the attack and returns and positions that he gets himself into. We've also seen Gibbs White sort of play a little bit more of a defensive role at points in the season for Forest, because he is such a utility man. He can play at any position across that midfield. So that's one to bear in mind. I just don't think it's worth the extra 1 million to go with him over someone like Alanga.
Yeah, a couple more players of note to talk about. Dominic Szoboszlai's in there at 6.5 million. Obviously, Ben ranked him at a 2-1. I ranked him at a 2-2, but that was before the pre-season friendly that we saw of Arne Slot's sort of first real game in charge. We saw them playing like a 4-2-3-1, which he operated with at Feyenoord. And a post-match, he did say that they will play with a number 10 going forwards, in that Harvey Elliott and Szoboszlai will most likely operate that position. What's your thoughts on this, Ben? Do you think you have to wait and see for him to sort of nail down the position first and then sort of get him in, or will you risk it come Gameweek 1 and have him in? Because the fixtures from Gameweek 1 are really, really good, right?
The fixtures are good, and this is, again, in terms of sort of someone making a mockery of the price, a Liverpool 10 at 6.5 million. If he's consistently starting, fantastic. Even if he's getting 60, 65 minutes per game, then that's worth the 6.5 million that you'll be playing for a Liverpool team that's elite in a fixture run that's also elite for attacking returns. So yeah, if he does sort of like, we'll have to see over the next couple of friendlies, etc., because we've got a couple more to go. Let's see what happens here, because Szoboszlai could end up being that breakout star and sort of really, making it a non-decision almost at this price point.
Yeah, 100%. And then two more players just to touch on, we both rank as third options, Declan Rice and Rodri. And for me, although they did boast pretty impressive attack and returns last season for both of them, I think these are the type of players, if you're going to keep them, you're going to have to keep them the whole season to sort of see those returns. I don't think you can sort of pinpoint when Rodri or Declan Rice are going to score or get an assist. What's your thoughts on these, Ben?
Yeah, it's at any point in the season, like, they're going to get 2-pointers throughout, and then all of a sudden it's going to be one, like, 10, 15-pointer that you're going to get. So for me, it's you don't, if you're going to have him, you don't want to miss out on sort of getting those returns. But in terms of explosivity, I think the other options have far greater goal threat and attacking potential. Okay, so moving on into the 7 million and 7.5 million price bracket. The first one really to mention has got to be Eberechi Eze of Palace at 7 million, with some great fixtures and a talisman as well. Both myself and Josh have ranked him as first. Good attacking returns in terms of his price point, more than anyone else at the 7 million price tag. Josh, what are your thoughts on Eze?
Yeah, he's currently in my draft at the moment. I think he's like 33% owned, so a really high owned player right now, and it's easy to see why. Under Glasner at the end of last season, all those Crystal Palace assets were performing unbelievably well. A lot of people had triple ups towards the end of the season on their free hits and things like that. And for me, like you mentioned, with Elise gone now, it does make him more talismanic. The players that they're looking to bring in don't really have that same sort of skill set as maybe an Eze or Elise. I think they're getting like Isma Sarr from Marseille to maybe replace Elise. So in terms of set pieces, potentially penalties as well, we could have that for Eze, which is really, really exciting. Obviously, I think in the last 4 penalties for Palace, Mateta's took 2 and Eze's took 2, so it doesn't really help us there, and we probably won't find out either in pre-season, because obviously Mateta's away with the Olympics, and you'd expect Eze to return a little bit later due to getting to the final with England. So yeah, for me, a really nice option, but I think there are some other players, maybe 0.5 more or even 0.5 less, that could maybe match his output in the opening 6.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to put all 3 of these players in a bracket: Rashford, Martinelli and Trossard, all at 2-2 for myself and Josh. It's the minutes risk that we are looking at here. Rashford, of course, not had the best season last year. Martinelli and Trossard, Martinelli had a good start to the season, Trossard had a good end to the season, but the minutes are never guaranteed with these two, because they are, I'd say, probably up to the same standard for Arsenal. So it's difficult to really pick a starter between those two. Josh, that sort of almost makes all 3 of them a non-option, right?
Yeah, for Gameweek 1, 100%. I just don't like picking players who are potentially a risk from the bat. It just leaves you open to booking in transfers almost immediately. So, yeah, for me, they are a wait and see, but equally they could be game breakers come Gameweek 3 or 4 if, say Trossard gets injured or Martinelli gets injured and then one of them becomes the nailed left winger. I think, yeah, we'd all be hopping on them just because of how much cheaper they are than the likes of Bukayo Saka at 10, obviously even Odegaard at 8.5 and Havertz at 8. You're saving yourself at least $1 million minimum going for that Arsenal attack if you can nail one of them down.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the guys that are just 0.5 more. Anthony Gordon is off my first Masters pick of the video. 27 attacking returns last season is just ridiculous at that price point. He's matching the attacking returns of some of those guys that are premium midfielders in the game. Obviously, sort of a little bit of an overt performance from him last season, but he is in a Newcastle team that were performing pretty fantastically at points last season. Josh, it's got, like, in terms of the price point there, 7.5 million, the most minutes out of all of them, nearly, and obviously so many more attacking returns. It's got to be sort of one of the first names on the midfield team sheet. Yeah,
literally, he's not left my draft since I opened the app. Pretty much, he's got a fantastic Game Week 1 fixture. Game Week 2's all right as well. Obviously, it does get a little bit worse after that as the difficulty shows a 12th ranking. But for me, when Newcastle do play at home, you'd probably bet on Anthony Gordon. It was almost like last season when Anthony Gordon played at home, you're like guaranteed to get a return. So yeah, ridiculous from him. What I will state though is that a few of those assists that he got were like FPL assists. So I think overall he got like 21 returns, but 6 of those were like FPL assists. So nice to have, to be fair. It could still happen this season, and I definitely think he is underpriced at the moment at 7.5 million. When you look at the company that he's surrounded with at 7.5, and then maybe look at other players' returns at 8.5, I think we generally have an underpriced asset here.
Yeah, very much underpriced. The other guys, though, I think are probably correctly priced, right? So James Maddison, obviously the concern is the difficulty of the fixtures, but if he sort of can start the season how he did last year, then he might be a decent option. Jota obviously is a decent option too, although the minutes is the risk, which is why I've only put him at a 2-1. With minutes risks, it's difficult at the start of the season. You sort of want to keep it relatively safe to an extent on who's going to get the minutes, etc. Jota, if he can nail down that spot, immediately goes to sort of like a first, potentially Masters level with the fixtures in hand. But I think that's going to be the case with a lot of Liverpool assets too. And then Jared Bowen, there's a couple of unknowns really with West Ham in terms of sort of how they're going to start out their season, how they're going to play under the new manager. So it's maybe a little bit of reservation from both myself and Josh with that. Josh, what are the thoughts on those sort of 3 players we spoke on?
Yeah, I think with Maddison, I've had him in my draft for quite a while, and then I've downgraded him recently to Brennan Johnson, and I think it's just because the opening 2 are good, and then you could easily move off a Spurs attacking asset for their harder fixtures, and I think at that 6.5 million price tag, like we said, there is a lot more options to move to. With this 7.5 million, there's not too many, and they all carry their own sort of risks. So yeah, for me, Maddison should be a good option, and if you pick him, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think you could use your money better elsewhere. With Jota, he's a first for me just because of the potential when he does play. His like minutes to goal or return ratio is almost on the same level as Mo Salah, and you're looking at a player who's £5 million cheaper than Mo Salah. So if we do ever get Diogo Jota nailed down in that team, which I don't think is necessarily out of the question. A lot of those Liverpool attackers have been in a big dip of form at the moment, and he seems to be the one who's on the up. So yeah, for me, he, like you said, Ben, he could generally be a Masters player if he was to be nailed down in that team. And then Jared Bowen for me is probably quite, even by me and you, probably quite like overlooked because he's been fantastic for numerous amounts of seasons in FPL. I remember last season he got me a hat-trick, which was unbelievable. So a bit of emotional investment from myself there as well. But 22 attacking returns, only 5 less than Anthony Gordon, who we said is, £1 million probably underpriced. So I think at points this season we will definitely own Jared Bowen. And it's just a case of the other attacking assets around him being slightly cheaper. So it might just sort of steer our eye away with obviously Kudus at 6.5. They're potentially signing John Duran at £6 million as well. So yeah, you could save yourselves a bit of money if you didn't want to go Jared Bowen. Okay then, so we're going to look at the premium midfielders now, and this is just basically £8.5 million and above. So we'll kickstart with Bruno Fernandes first. He is currently in my FPL draft with Fulham at home on the first day of the season. Fixture difficulty for United are mid-table, a bit like them last season really, 10th at the moment. He did create the most chances last season in the Premier League out of all players, which is a fantastic stat, and you can see that by the XA there with 10.23, an equally decent goal threat as well from him. Obviously he has the penalties at United, and for me personally, he's sort of almost underperforming his data, and I don't think that's down to him. I think it's down to the players that surround him at the moment. What's your thoughts on him, Ben? Do you think you'd have him or consider him for Gameweek 1?
I'd definitely consider him. Obviously, it's probably going to be at the sacrifice at sort of getting in a player from a team that's performed really well over the last season or so, which is obviously where managers maybe have to make that decision. But I think in terms of an option throughout the whole season, we always know Bruno is going to be a fantastic option because he's been so consistent over the last few years.
Yeah, and then Martin Odegaard, he's same price, same sort of stats really, just a little bit less goal threat from him, sort of matched on attack and returns last season, obviously playing in a much better side than Bruno Fernandes, but that also goes with the fact that the goals and attack and returns tend to be more shared around. Potential penalties, obviously, they do get almost shared about in the Arsenal team. No one really knows who is confirmed penalty taker. It could be Saka, it could be Odegaard, it could even be Havertz. He was taking them for Germany in the Euros. So, yeah, for me, that's why he goes into the 2-1 and maybe not the first category, because A, I'd prefer other Arsenal attackers, and B, he doesn't have that sort of nailedness of, penalties and something like that Bruno Fernandes does have. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I actually really don't mind Odegaard as a potential option, just because he has that much cheaper than Bukayo Saka. And if you are looking at a Haaland Salah draft, you maybe have to sort of not go with someone like Bukayo Saka, who's like essentially a third premium, and maybe go down to a Odegaard, because if you're looking at the Arsenal attackers, you've got those two, and then the rest of them sort of there is their upsides and downsides in terms of the midfielders especially, and in terms of attack you've not got too many options anyway up top. So yeah, really do like the Odegaard option in terms of sort of making sure that you cover that Arsenal attack.
Yeah, we're moving into the real premium midfielders this year, and sort of the players that I think a couple of these will definitely break out into the template from the start of the game. Phil Foden's up first, the cheapest one of the lot at 9.5 million. I think they've priced him really, really well, because he did have a fantastic season last season, as you can see, sort of matching the likes of Heung-min Son, Bukayo Saka with those attack and returns. But if we look at his expected data, he is massively overperforming it, and equally, Man City's fixtures aren't necessarily the best, but they're definitely not the worst either, and it is also Manchester City as well, which we've got to bear in mind. They will score against pretty much anybody. What's your thoughts on him this season, Ben? With his sort of price hike, do you think he's worth the same amount as the likes of Bukayo Saka and Son?
Yeah, I think they've priced him really well. To be fair, like it's going to be a big decision whether managers have him in or not, because it's again you're looking at the third premium option, and he performed well. I don't think there's going to be any rotation issues with Foden. He's become that much more important over the last season, so I do think he's probably rightly priced, and maybe he'll be slightly lower owned than you would have expected him. But yeah, I could quite easily see him being breakout and essential by game week 2 when they have that decent fixture.
Yeah, moving on to Son then. We'll touch on him briefly, but Spurs' fixtures, as we mentioned, do tail off towards game week 3 to game week 6. He has scored in pre-season in their Japan tour, so interesting there. He sort of play through the middle / out on the left a little bit, little mixture, and I think that's one of the weaknesses with Son, is that we just don't know where he will necessarily play come the start of the season at the moment. It could be out wide left, it could be up front, and equally I don't think anyone really knows what is the better position for him, because at points he's been playing really well in both positions. So for me, he's probably an avoid at the moment, especially at that price as well, when you can get the likes of Bukayo Saka and even Phil Foden for 0.5 cheaper. What's your thoughts on him, Ben?
Yeah, I think he's going to be quite low owned come the start of the season, but that's for the reasons that you've just mentioned there. I think there's obviously the tough fixtures. There's the potential of there being a lot of other options at Spurs at a really cheaper price point that are guaranteed the minutes, whereas some of the other options and alternatives to these premium assets are not as sort of decent as what the alternatives are to Heung-min Son at Spurs. So yeah, that's probably the reason. Like, he's always going to produce FPL points, maybe not to the extent that some of the others here have.
Yeah, and then next up on my list, he's down as a Masters, but Ben's ranked him as a 2-1. It's quite a big disagreement in reputation for Bukayo Saka between the graduates. For me, last season, a really solid season from him. Had like an injury almost all season long, it felt like, but still managed to turn up with 2,900 minutes in the bank. Almost averaging sort of like a 26 XGI for the season. Got 28 goal returns. Again, I feel like if he nailed down penalties and was their penalty taker, he'd be like straight in a lot of drafts. But because there is that air of, he might just hand it off to Odegaard like we saw sort of last season, I remember at the start of the season against Crystal Palace, I think that's what sort of turns me off a little bit and makes me look elsewhere. But I think he's priced really well, and I think he could even be more expensive when you look at Cole Palmer below him, similar sort of expected data, but he just massively overperformed in terms of his returns. What's your thoughts between the two, Ben? Who would you go for between Palmer and Saka at the minute?
I'd almost prefer Parma just to the certainty of the penalties, etc. Although you've got to also bear in mind that Arsenal's fixtures are a lot easier than Chelsea's to start off the season. So I can see a lot of managers rotating these players in and out. For now, to start the season, I'd potentially prefer Parma. But, that can easily change through sort of even a couple of pre-season friendlies. So, yeah, they're on a pretty similar level, in my opinion.
And then finally, it is Mohamed Salah. Ben has him in his draft at the moment. I currently don't have him. I think he's a fantastic option, but it's just a simple case of not being able to own everyone. And I think that's what they've done really well this year, is that no draft is the same pretty much. Everyone's got their difference in opinions and what they think is more important. For me, I have Haaland over Salah just because I think the captaincy will be on him for more of the game weeks before I plan on wildcarding. But equally, Mo Salah looks good in pre-season. Obviously, he's shaved his barnet now, so we've got a bold Mo Salah in that Arnie Slot system. Got an assist for that Szoboszlai goal as well against Real Betis. Ben, why is he in your draft?
He's so consistent, 200 plus points every year. Like it's one of those ones that he's not even he's performed to a level and getting the XGI that you'd expect from the returns that he's getting. So someone who's that consistent in their XGI and the actual returns that they're getting is definitely one that I've got to have. And the fixtures in itself, like the fact that they are so good compared to all the other premium options, just makes it a really simple option for me to have him in.
Okay then, so that wraps up our best midfielders video. Let us know what you thought about it in the comments. Obviously it's a new style for me and Ben going through all the players. We'll probably do this for the forwards and the defenders as well, so we sort of have a comprehensive list of who we think is the best. Let us know what your thoughts were in the comments.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
later. Have a good pre-season, everyone.
So you